Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We are jumping straight into the deep end today with a question. And it's a question that, quite frankly, messes with your head a little bit.
It really does.
It's one of those that sounds simple, but if you actually let it sit, it just starts dismantling a lot of assumptions. It comes from our source material today, a text called Answering God's Global Call. And here it is.
What if the true measure of a faithful church is not how many it gathers on Sunday,
Right.
but how many it is willing to send on Monday?
It's a complete inversion of the scorecard. I mean, we live in a world and, frankly, a religious landscape that is obsessed with accumulation.
Oh, absolutely.
You look at growth charts, seating capacity, budget surpluses. If the arrow is pointing up and to the right, you're winning.
You're doing it right.
And this text just comes along and says, you are measuring the wrong thing. It calls the whole model into question. And before we get into the weeds, I do want to set the context. This text, it's specifically addressing the Filipino Church and its unique position in global history right now.
Which is a fascinating case study in itself. We'll get to that.
We will. But the principles here, this idea of seating capacity versus sending capacity, that applies to basically any faith community, any organization, really.
Absolutely. The core argument is that the Great Commission, this sort of mandate in the Christian faith to go into the world, it isn't a strategy problem. It's not about better marketing.
Or more funding.
Right. The author argues it is a formation problem. If a community isn't sending people out, it's not because they lack a plan. It's because they're malformed.
Wow. Malformed. That is a heavy accusation.
It is.
So let's unpack what that wrong formation looks like. The source critiques what it calls the attractional model.
Right. And most of us, whether we're religious or not, we recognize this model. It's standard procedure.
Build a strong center.
You create excellence, great music, a charismatic speaker, seamless childcare, comfortable seats. The physics of it are centripetal.
Pulling everything in.
Everything is designed to pull people from the periphery to the center.
If you build it, they will come. The classic line.
Exactly. And the source is careful here. It doesn't say gathering is evil. It points to the book of Acts, specifically Pentecost, where thousands gathered. So gathering it's a necessity. But the critique is that if the process stops at gathering, the organization becomes a lake, not a river. It stagnates.
So the gathering is supposed to be a formation station, not a final destination.
That's the idea. And the text points out this pattern in the book of Acts that really counters this mega center idea.
The pattern of scattering.
Yes, and this is where the narrative gets really interesting. In Acts chapter 8, the church in Jerusalem is massive. It's successful by our metrics, and then a persecution breaks out.
Which sounds like a disaster.
Right. In any organization, if your headquarters gets attacked and your people run for their lives, you call that a failure. You call that a disaster.
You fire the CEO to try to salvage what's left.
Right. But the author uses this incredible phrase to describe that event. Divine propulsion.
Divine propulsion. I love that. That's a great image.
It completely reframes it. The scattering of these people wasn't a disruption of the plan. It was the execution of the plan.
So the argument is they were getting too comfortable in Jerusalem.
They were settling. So this messy, chaotic event was actually the mechanism to get them moving.
So the formula the text proposes is gathering leads to formation. Formation leads to scattering. And the scattering, that's what leads to multiplication.
Correct. And if you try to bypass the scattering because it's uncomfortable, well, to be honest, it is uncomfortable.
Of course.
You kill the multiplication. You just end up with addition, at best.
The source uses the church in Antioch from Acts 13 to really illustrate this. And this is the part that struck me as so counterintuitive.
This is the Antioch model. So, context. The church in Antioch is booming. It's the new hub.
Right.
And they have these superstar leaders, Barnabas and Saul, who, becomes the Apostle Paul. These are the heavy hitters.
The guys you put on the billboard? They're the retention strategy.
Precisely. And then, according to the text, the Holy Spirit speaks to the community and says, set apart for me Barnabas and Saul.
That's an organizational nightmare. You don't send your best people, you send the interns.
Or the people you can afford to lose. But the text just hammers this point. Antioch sent their absolute best.
This is attraction.
And that is the uncomfortable truth here. A faithful community sends its strongest members, not its surplus. We tend to think of mission as something we do with our extra.
With what's left over.
Yeah. Antioch viewed it as something they did with their essential resources.
But why? I mean, logically, that just seems like suicide for the local church. If I send my best leaders away, who runs the ship here?
And that's where the theology comes in. The text argues that this theology of sending isn't just an activity the church does. It's rooted in the very nature of God himself.
What do you mean?
Well, think about the Trinity. The text traces this flow. The Father sends the Son,
Okay.
the Son sends the Spirit, and then the triune God sends the church. Sending is the fundamental activity of God. So if a church just sits there and accumulates, it isn't just failing a task.
It's acting against its own DNA.
It's having an identity crisis.
That really shifts how you read the Great Commission in Matthew 28. Go therefore and make disciples.
Right.
I think a lot of people hear that as a closing remark, like a coach yelling, hustle, as the team runs onto the field.
A slogan.
Mm.
But the text calls it the unveiling of the church's identity. Jesus didn't say, come and admire me. He said, go. The primary verb is active.
So if your community's primary verb is sit or gather, you aren't really functioning as the thing you claim to be.
That's the argument.
Okay, so the theology is solid, the logic is there.
Mm-hmm.
But we are dealing with human beings, and humans are wired for safety. The source identifies 3 specific, deep fears that keep communities from shifting to this model. And they felt very, very real.
They're deeply human fears. The first one is the fear of loss.
Which goes right back to that Antioch example.
Exactly. It's the fear that sending feels like dying. If we send out our best leaders, our best musicians, our own kids, we are losing them. The spreadsheet shows a negative.
And the text doesn't try to dismiss that feeling.
No, it admits that, yes, it is a form of dying. It references the grain of wheat.
From John 12:24.
Yeah. Unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. This is the kingdom economy. It's this paradox that production requires destruction.
You have to bury the seed to get the harvest.
If you keep the seed safe in a jar on the shelf, it's secure, but it'll never be anything more than a seed.
But psychologically, we prefer the seed in the jar. We can see it. We can control it.
And control is a huge part of it, which leads right into the second fear, scarcity.
This is the practical worry. We don't have the budget for this. We can barely keep the lights on here.
We need to stabilize the home base first. That's the common refrain. But the source material pushes back so hard on this. It uses biblical stories like the widow's oil or the feeding of the 5,000.
Right.
The argument is that abundance is found in the act of obedience, not before it.
So the idea is that if you wait for a surplus to send, you'll be waiting forever.
Because organizations always consume their own surplus. Expenses rise to meet income. The text argues that mission is fueled by faith, not by checking the bank account first.
Which is a terrifying way to run a business.
But apparently the only way to run a mission. And then there's the third fear, the big one for the actual people who are going, cost.
Cost is real.
The text is very honest about this. It talks about relocation, leaving family, learning difficult languages, cultural humility, which is a nice way of saying you feel like a toddler again.
It's not selling it as an adventure vacation.
No. It reminds us that Jesus said, take up your cross, not take up your cushion. But the rebuttal it offers is crucial. The promise attached to the Great Commission, I am with you always, that transforms the sacrifice.
Into a privilege.
Exactly. It shifts the narrative from, look what I gave up, to look who I'm walking with.
I want to pivot now to the specific context of this source. We mentioned at the top, this was written with a focus on the Filipino Church. And this is a fascinating look at how global demographics intersect with faith.
It really is. We are living in the era of the Filipino diaspora, millions of Filipinos working all over the globe, nurses, engineers, caregivers, seafarers.
Right, the OFW, overseas Filipino worker, it's usually discussed in economic terms.
Yeah.
Remittances sent back home, often framed as a struggle.
Correct. But the author views this through a theological lens. They reference Acts 17, which talks about God determining the times and places of peoples.
Mm-hmm.
And the argument is, what if this mass migration isn't just an economic accident? What if it's a strategic placement?
So instead of seeing themselves as just scattered workers trying to make a living,
they're challenged to see themselves as sent witnesses. It's a massive shift in self-perception. Imagine you're a domestic helper in Hong Kong. Society might overlook you.
Yeah.
But this text says, no, you are a strategically placed ambassador in a home where no traditional missionary could ever get access.
That is incredibly empowering. It dignifies the work and the worker.
It does. It calls this the Filipino moment in God's story.
But, and here's the challenge, how do you actually move a community to think like that? The text outlines a structure for this.
It breaks it down into 3 spheres: the church, the family, and institutions. And honestly, the section on the family is maybe the most challenging part of the whole text.
Oh, absolutely. I had to pause on this part. It talks about parenting.
It notes that Christian parents who claim to believe the gospel is the most important thing in the universe often pray for their children's success in very worldly terms.
Yeah.
Good grades, good jobs, safety.
Proximity. Lord, use my child. But preferably within a 30-minute drive with a robust 401k.
Right. And when a child says, I think I'm called to go to a difficult region, the parents are often the first ones to hit the brakes. The text calls this an idol of safety.
Daddy gets hard.
It contrasts this with Hannah in the Old Testament, who dedicates her son, or Mary surrendering Jesus. It argues that kingdom-minded parenting prepares children for a calling, not just a career.
It's asking parents to check their own definition of success for their kids.
Exactly. And then for institution seminaries, Bible schools, it says they're often too academic. We're filling heads with information, but not building spiritual resilience.
Right. Knowing Greek verb tenses doesn't help you when you're lonely and isolated in a foreign culture.
Precisely. They need grit. The text argues the whole system needs to pivot from what it calls safe faith to sent faith.
Let's define that. Safe faith versus sent faith.
Safe faith is defensive. It asks, how do I preserve what I have? How do I keep my kids safe? How do I keep my church comfortable? It's all maintenance.
And sent faith.
Sent faith is offensive in the strategic sense. It asks, how can what I have serve God's purposes? It's outward-facing. The text uses the story of Isaiah 6 to illustrate it.
The vision of the prophet.
Yes, and the sequence is vital. He sees God's glory. That's the encounter. He realizes his own brokenness, and then he hears the question, whom shall I send?
And his response isn't, what's the pay?
Or where are we going? It is simply, here am I, send me.
Here am I.
Mission follows encounter. The text argues if you aren't willing to go or to send, you might not have truly encountered the magnitude of who God is yet.
And it mentions the paradox of security here.
Right. The text asserts that the safest place to be is in the center of God's will, even if that will takes you to a dangerous place. It just flips our definition of safety upside down.
So we have the theology, the fears, the structure, what's the end game. The text talks about legacy. I'm guessing it doesn't mean having a building named after you.
Far from it. It argues that legacy isn't what you accumulate, it's what you release. Look at the church in Antioch again. We don't have a picture of their building. We don't know their budget.
Their legacy was Paul and Barnabas.
Yes. Their legacy was the movement they sparked by letting go of their best people.
That requires a total ego death for a leader. You have to be okay with your best fruit growing in someone else's garden.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And that is the test of true leadership, according to this source.
So for the listener who's hearing this and thinking, okay, this is intense, what do I do? The text does give some actionable commitments.
It's very practical. It starts with intentional prayer, but not generic God bless the world prayers. It suggests adopting a specific unreached people group and actually learning about them.
Makes the abstract concrete.
Second is give strategically, aligning your treasure with the mission. And the third one is my favorite because it destroys excuses. Go locally.
Engaging the diaspora that has come to you.
Exactly. You don't have to cross a border to cross a culture. International students, refugees, immigrants in your own city. If you can't cross the street to talk to someone different, you won't cross an ocean.
It's about building that muscle memory of crossing over.
Yes. And finally, the text touches on the unfinished task. It notes that while the Apostle Paul said he finished his race, the mission itself wasn't finished.
We're relay runners.
We are participants. The goal isn't for you to finish the whole task. It's to finish your part. It distinguishes between admiration and participation.
That line really stood out. Applause has never fulfilled the Great Commission.
It's a sharp critique. We can admire the missionaries, we can listen to deep dives like this and nod our heads, but unless we participate by going or by significantly sending, we're missing the point.
It really draws a line in the sand. It asks, will you organize your life around the mission, or do you just want the mission to kind of orbit your life, like a nice accessory?
That's the lordship question. If Jesus has all authority, his command isn't a suggestion, it's an order. And the text leaves us with a provocative thought about the next generation. I think it's the perfect place to land.
This part gave me chills. It's about what our kids are seeing.
It asks, are they watching a faith that protects comfort or a faith that pursues calling? Because as the author notes, our kids aren't just listening to our sermons, they are interpreting our priorities. If we say we value the gospel, but we live entirely for safety and accumulation, they will conclude that safety is the actual God we worship.
That is heavy, but it's a necessary weight. It forces us to examine the blueprint we're handing down.
It is. But the source ends on a hopeful note. It reminds us the end of the story is already written, a multitude from every nation. The question isn't whether God's mission will succeed.
It's whether we'll have the joy of being part of it.
Right.
Here am I, send me. It's a simple prayer, but it changes everything.
It really does.
We're going to wrap it up there. This has been a deep dive into answering God's global call. Whether you're the one going or the one holding the rope, for those who do, we hope this challenged you to look at your metrics a little differently today. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me.